When the war broke out in Ukraine, like all of us, I was disturbed. I had served as a missionary in that part of the world for 8 years, and I remember the heart-rending scenes of destruction and seeing the toll that it took on people who had to live through it. I knew that I had friends and fellow church members that would now be exposed to the horrors of war. I couldn't help but do something. I found out that, through a stroke of God's providence, the Euro-Asian Division Treasurer, the division responsible for Ukraine, had been stranded here in Orlando while visiting family and was unable to return to Moscow. I gave him a call and asked what we could do. He told me that they desperately needed funds for sending bread and fuel from western Ukraine to people under siege in the eastern part of Ukraine. I asked if he could get the money there quickly. He said that I could just send him an email as soon as we took up an offering, and he would release funds in Ukraine the very next day. I challenged my church to give sacrificially. Our goal was to raise $20,000 that weekend. We were able to raise over $50,000. God's people were excited to know that they were helping in a tangible way so rapidly on the front lines. The division treasurer and I then went to the administrative committee of the Florida Conference and told them the arrangement that Markham Woods had with that division. They agreed to do the same thing conference-wide. Each local church treasurer would report to the conference every Monday how much had been collected, and then an email would be sent to the division treasurer from the Florida Conference with the total collected from all churches. To date, over $500,000 have been collected and transferred to the Ukrainian Seventh-day Adventist Church to help in their evacuation and relief efforts. So what difference did it make? I and a group from my church with one other pastor and a couple other lay members made a trip recently to deliver money, children's supplies, and medications donated by Advent Health and other church members to see for ourselves what we could do to help them. What we found shocked even us. The Ukrainian Union President, Stanislav Nosov, told us that when an independent survey was done on Google asking people to indicate what humanitarian organization had helped them while they were in the war zone, 71% of respondents stated the Seventh-day Adventist Church. The first challenge is that the Adventist churches, schools, health centers, camps, and even church members' homes in western Ukraine are filled to overflowing with displaced families from eastern Ukraine. We didn't see 1 inch of square space in any Adventist building that was not being used in some way to house or feed these thousands of refugees. And the reality is that the crisis will only get worse as many of the 6 million refugees who fled to Europe at the beginning of the war for a few months return to their homeland. The church is in great need for finances to build long-term temporary housing for these people. Millions of dollars are needed for these types of structures that can be built in different parts of western Ukraine where refugees can reside comfortably until they return to their homes. The second challenge is that the Adventist Church in surrounding countries had sent in tons of fresh produce that aided in feeding the refugees housed in church buildings. The churches in the surrounding countries are not able to keep up that rate of assistance as their own resources are being depleted. That is, the Ukrainian church will need more finances now to purchase food to feed those refugees who are reliant on the church to survive. The third challenge is now that the front lines are on the far eastern border of Ukraine, the evacuation trips are now more expensive as the church continues to send vehicles there filled with humanitarian aid on the way in, and then with refugees on the way out. Fuel is very expensive, and each trip can cost over $1,000. We, in the Florida Conference, didn't realize that our funds would help make the Seventh-day Adventist Church in Ukraine to be one of, if not the most active humanitarian organization in this conflict. The question remains, will the rest of the church step up their giving to enable the Ukrainian Adventists to continue to do a mighty work for God and even increase their impact they are having on their country? I invite you to join this work in calling for and sending in our offerings in an expedited manner to help our brothers and sisters in Ukraine, and to continue our work of being the hands and feet of Jesus.